Okay. So I think you said we will discuss system of particles, right?
Hmm.
Now, the first thing that we need to understand in systems of particles is if you take a look at some of the complex objects, even when they were studied, uh, if we took at motion of car along a straight road, or we saw many problems involving free fall of objects. Okay, so we have
Yeah.
balls thrown up into the air, and then they were moving along a vertical line. They were actually slightly complex. Even when they were complex, we were treating them as just particles.
Hmm.
Okay, so what is the reason that we treated those objects as particles? What do you think?
Uh,
Let's
because.
say even if a car is moving along a straight road,
Hmm.
we treated a car as a particle and then did several problems in 1D motion at least. Right?
I guess maybe because a car is made up of, like, in reality, it's made up of a lot of particles, but then it's kind of not, I mean, possible, I guess, for like to calculate every single this
Okay,
thing.
so yeah, we can say that. I mean, it's not possible to look at every particle of the car, but as long as the car is moving only along a straight road, for example, if I take displacement of the car,
Hmm.
the displacement of the car can be measured by using any particle of the car, any part of the car. So
Yeah.
whatever we were studying so far, okay, if I take any part of the object, I can just use that part of the object to describe whatever we were studying. Uh, let's say we did several problems in motion in one dimension, or Newton's laws of motion. Okay, so all, let's say the idea is all parts of the object moved in the same way. Because
Okay.
they moved in the same way, it is okay to treat them as particles.
Okay.
Okay, so even the objects were complex, it doesn't really matter. Let's say, let's take a look at this one. Like, I have actually taken this from a site called pexels.com. Okay, so if I, let's see if I can play this. Oh, what is happening? I can't play.
It just looks like a picture for me.
No, 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 it's actually a video. Let me. So if you look at these cars, okay, uh, I mean, you pick maybe a car here. So it's just going along a straight road.
Hmm.
Okay, so the displacement of the car can be measured by taking any part of the car. Okay, so for those reasons, even the complex objects like cars, they were actually treated as particles,
Yeah.
right? And then, but now as we move forward, let's say when we try to study system of particles, the motion of a complex object cannot be treated as a, well, by just using the particle.
Hmm.
Okay, you cannot, we can no longer explain the motion of an object by just taking a part of the object. The reason is, again, if you look at this football, let's say, I think, so here, if somebody comes and then kicks this football, okay, as the football moves in the air, not all parts of the football move in the same way. Okay, so not all parts of the object move in the same way. So that is why we can no longer treat, let's say, objects as particles. But the good news is the motion of any complex object can be simplified by taking the help of something known as center of mass. Okay, so if you take the center of mass, the motion of the complex motion of any object can be simplified to things like this. So motion of an object can be described as translation of center of mass and rotation about center of mass. So going forward, what we do is, especially when we study rotational motion, okay, of rigid objects, we try to divide the motion of the object into two parts. We just pay attention to this special point inside the object called center of mass, and we just pay attention to the translation of that center of mass, and then we somehow transport ourselves to center of mass and then move with the object. Okay, so we are moving with the center of mass, and then as we move with the center of mass, the object just rotates about the center of mass. So the job of understanding rigid bodies, the motion of rigid bodies, becomes quite simple. Okay, so but in this chapter we are not going to do that, but these ideas are helpful when we study rotational mechanics. Okay, and now what exactly is the center of mass? If you look at the center of mass, is actually very simple. Okay, so to begin with, what you can do is, the center of mass is simply a mathematical definition. Okay, it's just a definition, but it has a huge physical significance. Okay, so as in we understand several situations involving system of particles, the definition of center of mass is very helpful. So right now it is like any average. Okay, so this is the example I normally give in my classes. Suppose, let's say there are 50 students in a class, 30 boys and then 20 girls. Okay, so if each boy gets pocket money, okay, so maybe 4,000 rupees per month, and then each girl gets a pocket money of around 5,000 rupees. Now, how do you calculate the average pocket money?
The number of boys into the amount they get, and then plus number of girls amount by total number of boys and girls.
Perfect, right? So your center of mass calculation is exactly that. Okay, so in the calculation of average pocket money, what are the weights? The weights are the number of boys and the number of girls. If the number of boys were greater, then the pocket money of the entire class will be close to the pocket money that a boy gets. Yeah, if the number of girls were greater, then the pocket money will be close to the pocket money that a girl gets.
Okay.
Right. So here, instead of, let's say, weighing based on the number of students of a particular gender, we try to weigh using mass. Okay, so we are trying to get some position, average position, based on how heavy each of the particles is. Okay, so the center of mass should be closer. If you have like two or more particles, the center of mass location should be closer to the particle having
heavier mass.
Heavier mass. That is just a mathematical definition. And because we are talking about a position, okay, position is always like a vector quantity. So the center of mass is also a vector quantity. And then it depends on the origin we select.
Okay.
Okay, so I think, is this clear?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then now to begin with, if I take really a simple system, okay, if I have a two particle system, Now what we can do is, if I take two particles, I can always place them along the line joining them. Okay.
Yeah.
So when I place them along a line joining them, so this is how we calculate the X center of mass. If you see here, let's say I have a particle of mass m1, another particle of mass m2. Because I have only two particles, I can just treat the line joining them as x-axis. And then I'm picking an origin. So particle of mass m1 has an x-coordinate of x1. The particle of mass m2 has a coordinate of x2. And then this is just the definition. It is almost like calculating average pocket money. Do you understand? Okay,
Yeah.
so and again, selecting an origin is up to the student. So you can place the origin anywhere.
Okay.
And if I go to three particle system, okay, now what we can do, if I have three particles, I can always say that they lie on a plane joining them. Okay, so in that case, we can have something like this. Let's say you have an XY plane. I have three particles, M1, M2, M3. And then this is where the center of mass is located. Okay, so I can say that X center of mass is like M1, X1 plus M2, X2 and so on, divided by sum of the masses. And then Y center of mass is M1, Y1 plus M2, Y2 and then divided by sum of masses. You get the idea? Now we have a problem to try. Okay, so here what we can do is X center of mass would be, so M1 X1. So we don't have to change the units of these masses. I can just write 50 and then its X coordinate is 0. And if I take M2, the mass is 100 and then its X coordinate is 1. Plus 150. And then we know the height of equilateral triangle is √3 by 2a. So in this case, it will be √3 by 2m. So we'll write √3 by 2.
But we're taking only x-axis, right?
So that is a mistake. Very nice. So what mistake I made here? I was doing X center of mass, but since I got the height, I somehow put the height. That is my mistake. So I should actually take what?
1 by 2.
1 by 2. Very nice. Okay, it was not at all intentional. I made a mistake. So it is 50. The sum of masses is 50 plus 100 plus 150. So what do we get here? I think this we can ignore. This is 100 plus 75.
175 by 300.
Yeah, 175 by 300. So this would be 7 upon 12. Okay, so that is X center of mass.
12.
Now Y center of mass would be again 50 into 0. So plus I think 100 into Y coordinate is 0 for this guy. And then plus 150.
0.
Yeah, this time I need that height, √3 by 2. And then divide by the total mass, which is 300. So 300. What do we get here? √3 by 4. So very nice. So this is the correct answer. So answer is C. Okay, now suppose you have...
That was a mains question.
Yeah, it was a mains question. See, mains and NEET questions are not at all difficult. Okay, so I mean, trust me on that. You just have to understand the concept clearly, and then you don't have to solve many problems also. You solve like few good quality problems around that concept, you'll be able to solve. Okay, and then it was this year's
Yeah.
means. When I said this
Yeah,
year's,
that's what I said.
last year's means. Okay.
Ah.
Now, many particle systems, if you have many particles, I think you can place them in 3D space. Okay, so
Yeah.
now in addition to x and y coordinates, you'll get z coordinate also.
Mm.
And then we can actually write these compactly like this. I think you're okay with this summation
Yeah,
notation. Yeah. So we could write like this. And then sometimes here we are having discrete system. When I say discrete system, we can actually count the number of particles.
Mm.
Sometimes we have many particles. So in that case, you have a solid object. Okay, so if you have a solid object, since there are millions of particles, this summation will become an integral.
Mm. Okay, yeah.
So they try to write it as instead of x will be written first, x into dm. You take some particle and then you write integral of dm. And the same thing you do for y and z coordinates.
Yeah.
Okay, now here, when we have so many particles, what happens is it becomes really inconvenient to, let's say, write x coordinate, y coordinate, z coordinate. So what we can do is we can use the vector form. So instead of, let's say, x and y, z, we can simply place, let's say, this first particle might be having these coordinates x1, y1, z1. So I can take its vector, r1 vector will be simply x1 I cap plus y1 j
Y1
cap
J cap.
plus z1 k cap. So in this center of mass calculation in the vector form, we are able to do it in one shot. Okay. So similarly, R2 can be written like this. So this is R1. Okay. And then the R center of mass that we get can be written as x center of mass I cap plus y center of mass j cap plus z center of mass k cap. Okay, so again, when you have a solid object, you can do something like this. Okay, so integral of rdm divided by integral of dm. Okay, so now you might have done okay, so here what we can do is let's take the ring first. Okay, so this is our semicircular ring. The center of curvature itself can be taken as the origin. Okay, so this is, let's say, x-axis, and this is y-axis. Here, I think in this discussion, we are assuming that the rod is uniform. Okay, it is thin and uniform. So mass distribution is uniform. Okay, so if I take a 1 centimeter piece anywhere, it will have the same mass. Now, if you look at y-axis, on either side of y-axis, I have the same distribution of mass, right? So what can you say about x center of mass in that case?
Be Rx.
See, what is happening? Imagine, let's say, if I take the origin here, I place a particle to the left of the origin of mass m at some distance, let's say 1 centimeter, and then place another particle of mass m to the right of the origin at 1 centimeter. Now, where will the center of mass of these two particles lie?
In between.
In between. So where? At the origin?
Yeah, oh yeah, sorry.
right? So now if I think about, let's say, if I look at y-axis, on either side, the mass distribution is same. So if I take a particle here, I have a similar particle here. So if I take a particle here, I have a similar particle here. So that means what should be the x center of mass? What is the coordinate of x center of mass?
Origin.
Origin. Very nice. So that means that should be 0.
What?
Okay, so this is bisymmetry. We
Yeah.
don't have to do anything.
Okay.
So all we have to do here is evaluate the location of y center of mass. This is what we are supposed to do. Now, this is another thing. It definitely involves integration. Whenever you have circular element, the suggested approach to integrate is by using angles. So what you do is you take x-axis as the reference line, and then you turn by an angle theta, and then take a smaller angle, again d theta. Okay, and then you consider this tiny portion here. So let's say if I take this tiny portion here, so this becomes my sample element. Okay, it's like this is your sample element, or you can say sample particle. Now, because the mass distribution is uniform, what we can do is, if I can get the length of that sample piece, I can get the mass of that sample piece. What is the length of that piece? So length of the sample piece will be, can I say r is the radius, suppose?
R d theta.
Very good, r d theta.
Sine.
No, it's just the length. Now, if I take the mass of that sample piece, dm would be, I can say, if overall the rod has mass capital M, suppose, I can say mass per unit length. Okay, or maybe mass per unit length. What is the length of this semicircle? It is pi r.
Pi r.
And then if I multiply by r d theta, I would get the mass of that element, which is m by pi into d theta. Or we could have said, okay, a pi radians is covering the entire semicircular rod. D theta would have this much mass. So that is another way of getting it. Now, if I take for just this particle, if I take the y coordinate, this is the y coordinate. Now, my y coordinate is simply r sine theta. Now, for solid objects, when we get the y center of mass, when we do the summation is y dm by integral of dm. But since the rod is uniform, I don't have to integrate. I can just take the entire mass. So what is y here? Y is r sine theta.
R sine theta.
And then d theta. Oh, sorry, not d theta. Y is r sine theta.
M by pi d theta.
Let me erase this. What is happening? Is it not functioning? Okay, so yeah, I don't know, it is not working. So r sine theta, and then I'll have to write dm. So dm is m by pi d theta, and then divide by mass. Now I'll have to integrate from where to where?
Sine theta d theta.
No, I'll have to integrate from
0 to pi.
0 to pi. Nice. So here, if I pull, let's say, constants out, I have rm by pi, and then I have to integrate sine theta d theta 0 to pi, and then the denominator also I have m. So what is the integral of sine theta d theta?
Minus cos theta.
Very good. So if I ignore this m, I get r by pi, and then I have minus cos theta, and then 0 to pi. So if I substitute values, what do I get here? R by pi. And then when I substitute cos pi, That is
Minus
minus 1.
2
So 1 minus minus will become plus 1.
plus.
So you get 2r by pi.
Hmm.
Okay, so it will be somewhere here. Okay, so if I look at the y center of mass, it will be somewhere here, 2r by pi. So if I am looking at this 2r by pi, maybe I can write it this way, r by pi by 2. So pi by 2 will be how much? Pi by 2 is like around 1.7.
Hmm.
So if it is 3.1, sorry, no, pi is 3.14. 3.414, right? Yeah, 3.14.
1.07. Yeah. No,
3.14.
3.14.
So 1.07 we can take, right? So
No,
this
1.57.
1. Oh, what calculations here? 1.57. So that means it will be less than, can I say r by 2?
Hmm.
Can we say that?
Yeah.
Okay, so it will be less than r by 2. So that it's just an indicator. I think the idea is x center of mass we don't have to do anything, and then y center of mass we have to calculate. Okay, so now what you do is use the result that we have obtained 2r by 5 for a semicircular rod, and then try to get the center of mass for a semicircular disc.
So disk is basically the.
Okay, so here what we will do is we're going to use the previous result. And again, when we do basic physics, this is the general idea. The idea is we're not learning calculus at an advanced level anyway.
Hmm.
Okay, so since we are not learning calculus at an advanced level, we are only dealing with single variable calculus. We're not studying multivariable calculus.
Hmm.
So when we do that, this idea of reuse becomes very, very helpful.
Hmm.
Okay, we try to always use the results we obtain, okay, in the problems that we see later. Like we now know the center of mass for a semicircular rod. Okay, now we want to get the center of mass for a semicircular disc. Now if I take this semicircular disc, I can say that it is made up of semicircular rings.
Hmm.
So it is collection of semicircular rings. So we can say that.
Yeah.
Then now if I put the diagram here, again the center of curvature I'm taking it as the origin. This is x-axis and this is y-axis. Again, if I look at the y-axis, on either side of y-axis I have the same distribution of mass. So I can clearly say by symmetry the x center of mass will be 0.
0.
So all I have to do is get the y center of mass. Now imagine this, if I break this into many rings, okay, suppose I have a ring 1 and then ring 2 and then ring 3 and so on. Okay, so I have several rings. Now this, the first ring has radius r1, the second ring has radius r2 and so on. Now what I can do is along y-axis, okay, along y-axis, I can actually replace each ring with its particle.
Okay.
Okay,
Oh.
so let's say the first ring has mass m1, suppose. I can place I can place a particle at its center of mass. Let's say m1 is the mass of the first ring. Now, where will I place it? A particle of mass m1 will be placed at 2r1 by pi. You get this? And then I
Yeah.
take the second ring. The second ring, suppose it has mass m2. I will place it at its center of mass. So that would be 2r2 by pi. So I will be having a stack of particles along y-axis. And then once I have a stack of particles along y-axis, I can say that my y center of mass would be now a summation of m1. Instead of, let's say, y1, I have its respective center of mass. Because what am I doing here? I'm actually replacing a ring with a particle. Okay, so where am I placing this particle? I'm placing it at its center of mass. So I'm having, let's say, center of mass of the ring. Let's say I'll say ring 1. And plus I have M2, and then center of mass. Oh, sorry, I should use Y here. So not R.
But won't mass be the same? Like
no, it will be different, right? See, as you go upwards, the rings will grow in size. So they will have different masses. And then if I add all of them, and then I'll have to divide by the sum of masses of the rings. We understand this?
Yeah.
Okay, now that means because I have a continuous thing, this has to be somehow converted into an integral. So if I take mass of the disk as capital M, the denominator anyway, I'll just write it as capital M. So that is not a problem.
Yeah.
But for each of the Y center of masses for the ring, I'll have to think. So what will I do is, let's say here, again, we will take this disk. That's the origin. So this is X. And this is Y. Now, we will always take an intermediate semicircular ring. Okay, so this is an intermediate semicircular ring. So when we do integration like this, we call this as the sample ring, sample element or sample ring. So let's say its mass is dm and it has a radius of r, and then we are taking its thickness to be dr.
Okay.
Okay. Now, here when we integrate, what we do is we just place the particle. Okay, so this particle we're placing at its center of mass. So when I place the integral, I'll place, okay, y center of mass for the sample ring, and then I multiply by dm. So this summation becomes integral. Do you see what I've done? Okay, now this numerator, the y center of mass for the ring will simply be 2r by pi. This result we are borrowing from the previous calculation.
Okay.
Now the only thing left is dm. Right? Now, how do I get the mass of this thin semicircular belt? What we can do is, because it is uniform, can I say mass per unit area is constant? So I will get the area of this ring. Okay, so it is a semicircular belt. You can take a pair of scissors and then cut it and then spread it like this.
Okay.
So if you cut and then spread it, the length of the ring, which is pi r, will be the length of the rectangle.
Yeah.
And the thickness of the semicircular belt will be width of this rectangle, which is dr. So I can say that area of this semicircular belt will be pi r dr.
Pi r. Yeah.
Okay, so what we can do is the mass of the semicircular belt dm would be mass per unit area. What is the area of a semicircle? It is pi r square by 2.
By 2.
And then multiply by area of this belt.
dr.
So area of the belt is pi r dr. So then what do we get here? We get 2 capital M by R square
R
into
square.
R dr. So that we can substitute here. So I have 2 capital M by R square R dr. And then divide by total mass. And then here we anyway integrate from 0 to capital R, right? Because R is the radius. We're okay so far? Now I think okay, if I pull the constants out, I have 4m, I think m disappears. I have 4 by pi r square. And then I'll be simply integrating r square dr. What is the integral here? R cube by 3.
R
right?
cube by 3, yeah.
So I get r cube by 3. So if I substitute the upper limit and lower limit, I think that is capital R cube by 3. So the y center of mass becomes what? Simply, this will be 4r by
3 pi.
3 pi. You're okay?
Okay.
So any questions here?
No.
Fine. Okay. So let us continue. Okay. Now this is a practice question for you. Okay. So what we can do here is, let's take our cone. Okay. So this is our cone. So I'll take vertex as the origin. Okay. So this is z-axis. And then this is x and then y. I think by symmetry we know x and x center of mass and then y center of mass are 0. So the question is anyway not looking at that. Okay, so we need to find z center of mass. What we can do is imagine a thin disk. Okay, so somewhere here. Okay, so this is our sample disk. Now its center of mass will be exactly at the center. So I can say that it's, if the disk is at a height z, okay, so from the origin, if it is at a height z, I can say that its center of mass is at height z. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Now, the z center of mass I can simply obtain by taking z dm in this case by total mass m. Now for the sample disk, if dm is the mass, I can say mass per unit volume. Okay, I'm assuming the cone has capital M mass. So what is the volume? 1/3 pi r square. So let's say if r is the radius and then h is the height given into volume of this sample disk. Now, if z is the location of the disk, we are saying the thickness of the disk is dz. All right. Okay. The thickness is dz. And then let's say the radius is small r. Okay. What will be the volume of that? It's like a short cylinder. It's like radius is r and the height is dz. So we can say the volume is pi r square dz. But now if I substitute, I have two variables, small r and z. And that is not good, right? Yeah. So how can I convert r into z? Can you think of a way to convert r into z?
Oh, the small r and z?
Yeah, small r, I want to convert into small z. How can I do that?
Like
I'll give a clue. No, I'll give a clue. You take this big,
Hypotenuse theorem.
no. You take this
See,
big triangle and
Pythagoras
small
theorem.
triangle.
Oh, okay.
You heard of these similar triangles?
Similarity.
Yeah, similarity. So we can use similarity, right? So if I take the small triangle, I can write R by H. And if I take the big triangle, I can write it as capital R by H. Oh, sorry. This I should write it as, I think the left-hand side should be Z.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So this is Z. Okay. So we can convert this, right? I think pi disappears and then I have what? I have 3 capital M by capital R H. Okay. So small r would be R square, capital R square by H square
into Z square.
Z square. Okay. And then we have this dz. You're okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Now what we can do is I can substitute there. What mistake I've done? What is the volume of a cone? 1/3 pi.
R square. Pi R square.
R square. Okay. Otherwise that will remain and then it will give trouble. Okay. So now I can substitute this here.
Yeah.
So I already have a z, so I can combine with this z cube. I will write the constants first. 3m. I think r square disappears. I'm just taking h cube, and then I have
h cube,
and then I have z cube dz. Okay, and then I'm going to divide this entire thing by mass m here, and then integrate from 0 to h. Okay. So you're going from 0 to h. Then this capital M disappears. I have 3 by h cube. And then this is z to the power 4 by 4. And then I substitute 0 and then h. So we will end up having 3h by 4.
Okay.
You're okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So any questions in this?
No.
No. Okay. And yeah. Okay, now that we understand center of mass, what we will try to do is we'll understand the motion of the center of mass. Okay, and again, like I said earlier, center of mass begins with a mathematical definition, and then whatever we did so far is like simple maths. We just took average calculation. Initially, we did summation, plain summation when we had particles. Then we had solid objects. That plain summation had become an integral. It's like mathematics has become slightly sophisticated, but it's still a simple average calculation. You understand? Now we want to understand the significance of center of mass. Okay, so to do that, what we do is we take that general R center of mass. If you take this general R center of mass
and integrate it, differentiate it.
No, very good. We differentiate it. Nice. Okay, so when I take this, then what we can do is I can first like take the total mass of the particles as capital M. So I can write it this way. So this M1 plus M2, I'm transposing it to the left hand side. Now here, as you rightly pointed out, we can take a derivative. So if you take a derivative with respect to time, so what will happen? If you see, if I ignore mass is a scalar quantity.
Yeah.
So the right hand side, I just have, let's say, a bunch of vectors added. Okay, so each term I can take a derivative. So when I take a derivative, the left hand side, I'm taking a derivative of the center of mass position. And the right hand side, I'm taking a time derivative of the individual position of the particles. So now what is the rate of change of position called?
Velocity.
Velocity. So we get this mass into velocity of the center of mass will be m1 v1 plus m2 v2 and so on. Now this is where you write velocity of center of mass as you write something like this, right? I think velocity of center of mass, when we calculate, we can use this. So we have m1 v1 plus m2 v2 plus m3 v3, and then divided by
M.
the m1 plus m2. Yeah, you
Oh.
can take m also, or capital M you can take. Are you okay with this? And then if I take a time derivative again, so a derivative of rate of change of velocity will be acceleration. So we get this.
Acceleration.
Okay. Now here we try to think about it. Okay. So now if I take the right hand side, what do I have? I have like m1 a1. So that means this is the consequence of, let's say, forces getting applied on particle 1. Okay, what is Newton's second law? Newton's second law
F1.
says F is equal to ma, right? So the moment you see ma, that means there are forces. There is a net force acting on that particle. Okay, so there is a net force acting on the first particle. There is a net force acting on the second particle, and so on. Now see, we have started with the simple definition, but now we started talking about forces. Okay, so now there are several particles like this. Now out of the several particles, suppose if I take ith particle, let's say out of all the particles, if I take ith particle, I can write that mass into acceleration will be because of the forces coming from outside the system and forces coming from within the system also. You understand?
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to do here is, suppose if I take, let's say I take a system boundary. Okay, so this is a system boundary. I have my particles inside here. So this is my system. Now I could be having objects outside the system applying forces. Okay, Earth is usually a good example. Okay, Earth usually applies forces. Okay, so I have objects outside the system. Now if I take ith particle, okay, so if I take some particle, let's say this is the ith particle, suppose this is the ith particle, particle I. Now the particle which is outside the system might be applying force. So that I'll call it as external force. Okay, maybe some other particle is also applying. Now, let's say if I take some other particle J inside, this jth particle will also be applying an internal force. But what do you know about Newton's third law? Newton's third law says that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So if jth particle is applying force on ith particle, the ith particle will apply force on the jth particle. So if you only restrict yourself to this system, okay, within the system, how many ever particles you have, if one particle is applying force on the other particle, that particle will also apply force on the formal particle. So that way there will be pairwise cancellation. You see that?
Yeah.
Okay, so here, this idea we are trying to use. Okay, so we know that force on ith particle due to jth particle is equal and opposite to the force on jth particle due to ith particle. So this way, what do we have? Let's say if I'm trying to look at the acceleration of the center of mass, now I can take, let's say, if I take all the particles, can I add all the external forces?
Yeah.
And add all the internal forces?
Internal forces will be 0.
Very good. So Newton's third law dictates that sum of internal forces is 0. So that means acceleration of the center of mass simply depends on the external forces. Internally, you can have anything happening. It doesn't matter. You understand this?
Yeah.
Okay, so now using this, okay, so once we have this acceleration of center of mass of the definition of acceleration of center of mass, we can begin to understand this linear momentum. I think the definition of linear momentum, I'm sure you are aware, right?
Mm.
Okay, so if I take a particle, if it has mass m and then velocity in some direction, its linear momentum is defined as mv.
Yeah.
So in this chapter, momentum means linear momentum only. The symbol that is used is p.
P.
So we try to write it as mv. Okay.
Mm.
So I think you're okay with this.
Yeah.
Then let me erase this, and then now if I don't have any external force on the system, then the acceleration of the center of mass will be 0.
0.
Then if acceleration of center of mass is 0, what should happen to the velocity of center of mass? It will be constant,
Constant.
because we have seen acceleration is rate of change of velocity. If acceleration of center of mass is 0, then the velocity of center of mass will be constant. Now, if I multiply by capital M, what do I have? I have momentum of the system. Okay, so I can take this and then I can say that this is momentum of the system, linear momentum of the system. So this is the famous law of conservation of linear momentum. And it is very powerful. I mean, it helps us solve many problems. Okay. Not only like in mechanics, I think even when you study modern physics, okay, so when people understand atomic physics and nuclear physics, there also the law of conservation of linear momentum is valid. Okay, it's quite a powerful law. And then if I'm writing using the momentum notation, P notation, I can say that Pi stands for linear momentum of the system before initial linear momentum, and then P final is the final linear momentum. You understand?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So now, okay. So I'll give you some time to work on this problem. Okay. So what we can do is, so there is a wedge, so we can just take a wedge somewhere here. This wedge has mass 4m, and there is a particle of mass m moving with velocity v. Okay, so now let's say this is before situation. So when it is at the maximum height, wherever it can go, suppose, so it can go somewhere here. Let's say this height is h. Now, if that is the maximum height, so that means with respect to wedge, it is not further climbing up. But if you look at the linear momentum, if I take my system as particle plus wedge, okay, if I take my system as particle plus wedge, the linear momentum initially and finally should be same. So what is the initial linear momentum? The wedge is not moving. So the initial linear momentum is that of the particle. So we can take it as mv. Now I should have linear momentum horizontally after the particle climbs up the wedge. So because this is the maximum height, they must be moving with the same velocity, v prime. So that's a common velocity. Okay, so they should be moving with the common velocity. So the final linear momentum of the system will be linear momentum of the particle plus wedge. But both of them are moving with the same velocity. So mv
Wedge
prime
and particle
plus, yeah, we can add them.
Yeah.
So these two are equal. So that means from here, what is the final velocity? It will be v by 5. Now there is no friction anywhere. So that means energy is conserved. There's no energy loss. So we can say that what kind of energy is getting lost? We can clearly see that kinetic energy is lost. and then the particle is gaining some height. So the gravitational potential energy is gained. So if I write this, I think we should get the value of H. So what is the loss in kinetic energy? Initially, I have half mv square, and then minus, finally I have, they are anyway moving together. So I can take them as a single entity. So I can write 5m, and then the velocity is v by 5, v prime square. So which I'll write it as v by 5 whole square is equal to mgh. So the left hand side I have half mv square, and then this is half into mv square by 5. So it will be mv square by 2 into, I think this will be 4 by 5. This is equal to mgh. So from here h should be 2v square by 5g. Very good. Okay, so that is the right answer. Okay, so now, okay. Now you're familiar with the system of, let's say, variable mass. Okay. Now, I mean, I usually derive this in the class, but I think for NEET and JEE mains, right now, since we are only doing like conceptual review, I'm skipping the derivation. So we can skip the derivation. What we will do is we will just take this and then use it. Now, if you have constant mass system, I think for constant mass system, let's say if there is a block of mass m, if there's a force acting on that particle, if the mass is not changing for the system, I can simply write F is equal to ma, where that A is dV by dt. So here, when you have variable mass system, the only thing that changes is this. Okay, so if the system is, let's say, either losing mass or gaining mass, even when there is no external force, the system can get acceleration. Okay, so imagine this. Okay, so suppose you are sitting in a chair with smooth wheels. Okay, and the floor in your room is also smooth. And then you take hold of that fire extinguisher. You see those red color cylinders? Okay, if we open the fire extinguisher in one direction, what will happen to you?
You will go
the other direction.
Yeah.
Okay, so suppose, so if you open the fire extinguisher, let the gas leave the cylinder, let's say towards your right, you will move towards your left. Understand? So there is nobody, let's say if I take you plus the extinguisher plus the chair as the system, there is no external force. Okay.
Yeah.
So if the system is losing mass or gaining mass, that itself can provide a force. Okay, you understand this?
Yeah.
And in the cases of rocket propulsion, okay, let's say when rockets leave Earth's atmosphere and then they go to deep space, there may not be any other heavenly body for maybe a certain duration applying any force, let's say. Then the acceleration, let's say if rocket wants to pick up some speed, okay, or change direction, okay, either it wants to increase the speed or change the direction, that is done with the help of this v relative into dm by dt. So the rocket burns the fuel and then it loses mass. Okay, so this is sometimes known as thrust force. I think you might have heard about this, right? So some of the problems in NEET, they might ask you a direct question on v relative into dm by dt.
Yeah.
But what we will do is we will try to work on some really nice problems Okay, we will not derive, though we will not derive this. We will take it on faith value. Okay, I mean, usually this gets discussed in the class, but it is very simple. I mean, if the system is not losing any mass, you anyway have external force is equal to mass into acceleration. If the system is losing mass or gaining mass, if the mass is getting changed, you have that middle term on the left hand side, of course. Okay, F external plus V relative into dm by dt together provide the acceleration dv by dt. You're okay? So now take a look at this problem and don't worry about this problem. Okay, so if I look at this problem, the rocket is moving in the absence of external forces.
Force.
Okay, so when we take this F external plus V relative into dm by
Oh, I
dt
missed that.
is equal to mass into dv by dt. So this is what we are supposed to use. So what we can do is, so let's say this is the rocket, suppose. Okay, so it will be a funny rocket, but yeah. So this is the rocket. Then this is 0. Okay, so there is no external force. So we can forget about this. Okay, and we are asked to find the velocity of the rocket. So we are saying, okay, at time t, okay, so at time t, let's say the velocity of the rocket is v in some direction. Okay, so that direction we are taking it as plus. Okay, so the exhaust is leaving the system with constant velocity u in the opposite direction. So we can say relative velocity will be minus u.
Minus u.
Now dm by dt, okay, I don't know at what rate it is changing. So I'll write dm by dt. Okay, at some time t, let's say the mass of the rocket is m, suppose. So I'll take m and then I'll write dv by dt. Now I don't need time information, so I will leave it. Okay, so what I will do is minus u, which is anyway constant. I'll take dm by m is equal to dv.
Yeah.
So I can integrate on both sides now here. So initially the mass of the rocket was m naught. The velocity of the rocket was given v. Okay. And then finally we want some velocity when the mass is m. So the left hand side I have simply, this is a simple natural log of m, and then you substitute m and m naught. So that is, I think right hand side is simply v. So if I substitute, I'll get minus u natural log of, I can write m by m naught. Now look at this. Okay, m is actually smaller than m naught. So the natural log will be negative. Negative into negative will be positive. So the rocket will get velocity in the direction positive which we have assumed. Yeah, positive velocity. Okay. You're okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll give you one more. Okay. So try this.
The solution says m naught by m.
The solution says m naught by m, but this is given vectorially.
Okay.
So this is given as vectorially. So when I substitute with the signs, that u will become minus u. So minus minus will become plus. See, the solution will become, let's say we have taken upwards as positive. So upward direction is positive. So the left hand side will be v. The right hand side will be minus, it will be minus u. And then natural log of m naught by m.
Okay.
So it will be plus again.
Okay.
Okay, so now try this. Again, the external forces are absent. So we still have this v relative. External forces I'm removing. So sorry, v relative into 1 second. Okay, this is a little different. I'll have to get the eraser and then erase. So V relative into dm by dt is equal to mass into dv by dt. Okay. So here, let's take the rocket again. Okay. So they're saying the acceleration of the rocket is constant.
So dv by dt is constant.
dv by dt is constant. So the right hand side is constant.
Okay.
So V relative, now let's say it's again u, right? So we can take upward direction as positive. So the left hand side is minus u. I have dm by dt. So at some time t, we are saying mass is m. So this is m into, I can take it as a. So now suppose if I bring dm by m onto the left hand side, right hand side, what do I have? Minus a by u into dt. Now I can integrate. So at t equal to 0, what was the mass of the rocket? M naught. At some time t, mass of the rocket is, let's say, m. So the left hand side, I have natural log of m. I have m and m naught. The right hand side, I have at by u. So this is natural log of m by m naught. I think that is okay. Is equal to minus at by u. So this, if I remove the log, I can write using the exponential function.
I did the same thing, but then I brought a this side.
Oh, okay. So you just retained it as a log.
Yeah.
Then I think you should be all right. Then you will be able to, well, when options are given in the NEET exam, you'll be able to identify them. Yeah. Okay. So let's imagine that the rocket is moving in this direction, suppose. Okay, so let's say that is the velocity. Now, because they're saying the gas is ejected with a constant velocity at right angles to the direction of the motion of the spaceship. So we can say that the change in velocity that it obtains, okay, will be at right angles. So the rocket will get change in velocity in this direction. So let's say that is dv. Okay, and then the final velocity will be in this direction. So that is the final velocity. And then imagine that it is able to turn by an angle d alpha. Okay, now we can write, okay, at this tiny instant, I can write tan of d alpha is equal to dv by v naught. Okay, but d alpha is very small. You know, if when angles are very small,
You can just
write
take the angle.
you can take d alpha. So you can write d alpha as dv by v naught. Now in this direction, let's say in this direction, what we can do is we can use this v relative into dm by dt is equal to mass into dv by dt. Okay, so v relative is u. Okay, so here we're just getting the magnitude of dv. So v relative is u, and then I have dm by dt is equal to mass at some instant into dv by dt. So if I ignore dt, I can write here, let's say d alpha will be, dv will be what? U dm by dt. So I have u, and then I have dm by m. Is it okay? From here, dv is u into dm by m. And then I have v naught here. Now this
so now
I can
just integrate.
Just integrate. So when we integrate, let's say initial angle is, let's say, 0, this orientation, and then we turn by angle alpha. So initial mass is m naught, and we get m. Maybe I'm thinking we should take this sign so that dv is appropriate. Otherwise, we might get into trouble. So we'll take with sign. Okay, because this mass is like decreasing, right? So we should get a positive one. So this is alpha, so minus u by v naught, and then this is in log of m. So substitute the lower limit and the upper limit. So if you do that, you'll get minus u by v naught, natural log of m by m naught. You understand this?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's it. I think that is what we get. I think m naught by m is written, so the negative sign is not there.
Okay.
Okay.